2 weeks ago, we heard about a power group called the Pharisees. And last weekend we heard about Zacharias, the tax collector, representing oppressive and continuing and controlling government officials. Today, we hear about another power group called the Sadducees. The Sadducees were all about money, power, and control, not about religion. Politics and profit were their big concern. Life after death didn't matter much to them because they really didn't believe in the immortality of the soul and the soul's resurrection into everlasting life. There are lots of Sadducees around us today. They are the drug dealers, the pushers of pills, booze, pot, and heroin, a whole host of designer drugs, and the sex trade industry, and all that is marked under the pleasure principle. They set the standard of what's cool and what's uncool in the music award shows, MTV, Miley Cyrus, Paris Hilton, Chris Brown, and the Kardashians. They want to be in control of fashion and fads, setting the pace, the standard, the norm of what's in and what's not. Jesus was a threat to the power of the Sadducees, both the 2,000-year-old variety as well as today's variety. If he had left them alone, they probably would have left him alone. But Jesus kept doing and saying things that threatened their power and their influence. His teachings cut into their business interest and their cash flow. With all of this whipping of their money changers and throwing around the tables in the temple, they considered Jesus to be a dangerous fanatic who had to be dealt with. So they set out to make him look like a fool, and later on they would join with the Pharisees in a plot to kill him. In today's gospel, we find the Sadducees confronting Jesus with the ridiculous contrived story of an unfortunate woman who had married and then lost 7 husbands. They didn't start with the real issues, namely a belief in life after death and the consequences of our daily decisions in determining how we would live in that life after death. Instead, they started with the question of whom the woman would belong to in the next life. They were no doubt laughing before they finished with their crazy question. They thought, what a fool Jesus would look like trying to answer their clever little question. But Jesus wasn't laughing. He ignored their stupid question and instead asked them a question about their national heroes, namely Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses. Did they think that God created these giants only to blot them out into nothingness when they died? Do you really think that all of those beautiful people in your lives who you know, who are strong, loving, wise, and are compassionate and kind, and who care so passionately for life and love, do you really think that when they die they simply go poof, simply disappear into clouds of nothingness? The secular atheists of our day do. There are lots of silly questions that the worldly put to us. There are lots of questions that divert our attention and take us away from the most fundamental and the most important question of all. And that question is, why do you exist? Why were you brought into being? What is the meaning of your life? We have the answer. They don't. It is absurd to imagine that all of the love, all the beauty, all the compassion, care, concern, goodness, and the hunger for justice and decency that you find in yourself and admire so much in others is there only to be blown away at death. And it is really absurd to hold on to the position that the goodness, love, and pursuit of justice that we have in our hearts and souls and have shared with others are only good for a few short years we live here on earth, and that it simply disappears into nothingness at death. That truly is absurd. And what is equally absurd is the Sadducees' question about who has ownership and control of the woman in the next life. Do you hear what the real question is? It's a question of which brother owns the woman, which one controls her, to which male does this female belong? When we deceive ourselves about Jesus, we deceive ourselves. When we play games with God, we play games with ourselves. Furthermore, we play games with those around us. Ultimately, we play games with the life we are destined to live after death. There is no such thing as a small decision in life. All decisions have consequences. Our life after death, who we are, and what sort of character we shall take with us into this life is shaped and formed by the questions we answer in the way we live our lives right now. Now, tomorrow, and throughout the coming week, and throughout the remaining days of our lives. There really is no such thing as a simple life that doesn't matter, nor is there an act of love that's of little or no consequence. Wasn't that one of the main points of Jesus' teaching? So, what are your questions? The questions you want to ask God. Are they silly and ridiculous? You hear people around you making God's church appear to be silly, stupid, and of little or no consequence. Those who think like the Sadducees are alive and well and quite active among us today. Asking the right question is of supreme importance. I believe that the reason why you were born, the reason why you are living here among us today, and the reason why you will die is to love God face to face. And I also believe that the face of God is found in those around us who are hungry for love, for goodness and decency. I believe that the face of God is seen in those who are imprisoned in their addictions and their compulsive behavior patterns, in those who are lonely and have no one to love them, in those who are sick with self-hate and with self-loathing. And I believe, too, passionately believe, that God has fallen in love with ordinary humanity, has fallen in love with you and with me, not just the saints. And that we celebrate here on the altar of the wedding feast of the Lamb, so that God's body and blood can mingle with and become yours. I firmly believe that we only have to glimpse here on earth of what love and marriage will really be like in the everlasting life that awaits us. To my way of thinking, it is silly to think that a beautifully lived life disappears into nothingness when we die. The Sadducees had nothing of substance to offer at the time of Christ. And the Sadducees of today, likewise, have nothing of lasting value to offer us. But God, being a God of the living and not the dead, has everything to offer you and me. May we now and all the days of our lives respond fully to his loving offer of himself to us here on our altar in the wedding feast of the Lamb, when with his body and with his blood he joins himself to us in a marriage that will last forever.